Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Kenny McBride and joining me today is Norrie Hunter from Indie Live Radio. Norrie, thank you very much for being with us.
It's a pleasure, Kenny.
So our very first story tonight is that the Scottish economy continues to grow. This is a report that the updated GDP statistics for the first quarter of this year showed that the Scottish economy grew by 0.6%. Derek Mackay, the Economy Secretary, said, "Growing the economy is a priority for the Scottish Government, and these results show the actions we are taking are working. Scotland's economy continues to perform well, with GDP growing faster than the UK during the first quarter of 2019 and unemployment at a near record low." He then, of course, goes on to discuss some of the risks of Brexit, but fundamentally, this sounds like quite good news.
Well, it's good news. It's always good news when the economy's on the up. But a lot of people will be, I suppose, unimpressed by a small percentage. Those that are on a low income or on 0 hours contracts will be looking at this and just turning away. What does it mean to them in actual terms? I think the news is good because the mainstream media will be looking at this, because if that was 5% below, lagging, they'd be on the S&P like a shot and they'd be plastering it all over the media. So, well played, Derek Mackay. He's got the figures on the up, which is what he's wanting. But in the broad scheme of things, I don't think it'll matter much to the average person in the street.
Yeah, I think you make a good point that this at least negates a lot of negative publicity. Anytime where Scotland is doing better than the UK average, it's just a quiet thing that we just move on with our day with. Anytime anything is slightly worse, we get an outcry, and why is the SNP failing Scotland? So it is good news in that sense. Mm-hmm. Although, as you say, I mean, 0.6% is not a huge amount. And again, like you said, a lot of people are not feeling any sort of growth. We're still seeing very low wage growth, a lot of very insecure employment. What do you think could happen that might improve some of those issues?
Well, I think we've got to remember that Brexit's come around the corner, and the SNP, any government worth their salt, has got to be preparing for that, because we're going to run out of food. We know that for a fact. Medicines are going to be a short supply. So you've got to have a second budgetary responsibility for Brexit. And if you do that, then you've got to be very cagey about creeping up the economy, because creeping up the economy might be good for some, but it might not be good for others. You know, people trying to import stuff in, and we know, the pound's pretty weak as it is just now. So, and we don't have all the levers that a proper government should have. So it's very difficult to see how we could improve even further on those figures. It's amazing that the Scottish Government managed to climb up a bit and promote better figures than what we're expecting.
Well, I mean, you do make an interesting point there. Obviously, with a weak pound, that tends to improve exports, and Scotland has a much better exporting economy than down south tends to. Mm-hmm. But of course, with Brexit, that it's the exports that are perhaps the most threatened part of the economy, because we're throwing up walls. Do you suppose? Well, we're going to get to Brexit later, so maybe we should just move on to the next story. This one is on climate. The cabinet met in Stirling yesterday. This is today. This is part of the travelling cabinet. This was the 50th time that the cabinet has gone and visited another town apart from Edinburgh. In Stirling's case, a city. And this was announcing that a project for the Stirling District Heat Network has been given £2 million through the Scottish Government's Low Carbon Infrastructure Transition Programme, which was a collaboration between Stirling Council and Scottish Water Horizons. Apparently, this particular kind of district heat system is the first of its kind in the UK and will provide affordable low-carbon heat to the local Stirling community. This is using wastewater. I'm not exactly sure of the method that's being used for this. There's not a huge amount in this press release that we've had.
No,
but it's a very interesting story nonetheless, I think.
It is indeed. It's wastewater that might be flowing back into the sea or the rivers, and it's been recycled again to create hydropower, I think, in this case. and that's going to help small businesses reduce their electricity counts. Now, I was at the Isle of Egg not so long ago, and they've got their own power systems there, and they work remarkably well and efficiently. So if it can work there, I think it can work in Stirling as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a number of district heat schemes being developed around the country. The one actually very close to us here in Glasgow, and they are, from all accounts, way more efficient than the kind of heating systems that we're using now. It does seem like the move of the future to.
Absolutely. I think we're going to have to look at different ways of heating our systems, because as the climate emergency comes in, we're going to have to reduce our intake of power so that everybody gets a share of it, and so we don't run out. But Scotland is in a very lucky position, actually, because we're loaded with tidal power, hydropower. We get a lot of rain, of course, and even we get a lot of sun, believe it or not. And solar power is a big contributor to our power systems. So we're very lucky. Other countries aren't so lucky, but it's good. It's good that we're showing the way that we can do other things, even though we might have loads of power anyway.
Yeah, one of the other things they've announced here: £300,000 to be invested in what they're calling climate-ready classrooms, which is to help young people aged 14 to 17 develop their understanding of climate change, its causes and potential impacts. Programmes aiming to engage with at least half of Scotland's secondary schools over the next 2 years and accredit almost 5,000 young people as carbon literate. What do you think of that particular programme? Well,
good as well, but I can tell you, youngsters are savvy. They're very savvy about this. We had all kinds of school closures on Friday. They came out because we're concerned about their climate. Nicola Sturgeon kind of lately came to the party in that one, but the Greens have been pretty strong. It's a help, but I think kids have got the internet and they know what's what, and they can see the news that they want to read, and there's news programmes out there for them, and they get quite concerned about the level of waste, particularly waste in the seas and on the land. So it's good in a sense that they're helping that, but I think they're behind the curve a bit on it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have that kind of idealism at that age that, you know, we can change something, and it's tremendous. I mean, we've seen from the likes of Greta Thunberg, who's, you know, probably the most famous climate activist in the world now, and is still only 15 years old.
I know.
I think young people certainly have the most to lose, and a lot of us older people have a lot to give back to the next generation.
If you think about it, when you're 15, you've got a whole future ahead of you want to take care of. When you get older like us, we've not got much of the future left. So
hopefully still some.
We have some. There's life in the old dogs, yeah, don't get me wrong, but for youngsters, their vision for the future has got to be key to all of this, because we can't leave them a disgrace, a mess of waste, ungrown trees, fallen trees, the lot. We have to build a society that's capable of looking after them.
Do you think that having a lower voting age in Scotland can have any impact there? Do you think that's something where young people's voice can actually be heard more clearly?
Well, with 16, 17-year-olds are you know, can marry, can pay taxes, that kind of thing. They're not daft at that age. They've got a fully functioning brain. And the youngsters, particularly my daughter, who's 11, has a sponge-like brain. She can take in information and deal with it and put something back to me that I'd never expect. And so, yes, the more you get young people into these grown-up issues, I think the better we can all be for it, because it's inclusive.
So the one other, two other items here. The travelling cabinet has said that carbon emissions resulting from their traipsing around the country will be offset by planting of trees in a local community forest. And the Scottish Government has also committed to ensuring that all future similar meetings are as low carbon as possible. Do you think this kind of thing is just a fig leaf, if you like?
I do actually. How long does it take for trees to grow? It takes 20, 30, 40 years for them to mature. Okay, they're doing something, but is it enough? I don't know. Is it just something that people like to hear? I don't know. It seems a bit token to me, to be very honest. Plant a tree because we've taken this on the road. I don't know if you can equate the two, to be honest. But it's good that we're planting more trees. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I mean, any trees are good trees. What is it they say? The best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago.
Yes.
The next best time is today. So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I have kind of an interest in, and I think we were talking just before the show about going up through the Highlands, and we talk about this kind of stark beauty that Scotland has, but actually it's not meant to look like that.
No, it's not.
Historically, the Caledonian forest covered almost the entire northwest of Scotland, coming down well south of Perth.
Yes.
And now there are just a handful of wee patches.
That's right. There's a few reasons for that. It's firstly, there's been a lot of ignorance about trees and what we know about trees. Did you know that they soak up an awful lot of water? They give oxygen back to the society. They don't take it in through their leaves. That's why they can stay by the roadside. They take it in through their roots. Like where I stay in Hamilton, when you plant trees like, let's say, elm trees or beech trees, what happens is the roots get together and straddle, and it's almost like trees talking to each other. But that's good because in Hamilton, there's old mines and there's big holes underneath that can bind the ground again. So trees have got more than one use, but grouse moors have chopped down trees so that the rich and I wouldn't say just the rich take their chums on and they shoot grouse. They're the least effective economy for the land. Yeah. And I don't know if you've heard of Lateral North. They produced a series of issues on what you could use the land for: black skies, mountain bike trails, that kind of stuff, all making much more than grouse shooting.
Yeah, I mean, we have a major land use issue, particularly in the Highlands. I mean, it affects all of the country, but especially once you get out of the Central Belt and you're into these areas which are just turned over to hunting and shooting and the like.
Well, they're not for us.
Yeah.
They're not for us.
They're never really accessible to the average Scot. The vast majority are. I mean, we're told that Alistair Jack became Scottish Secretary largely because he has a nice shooting estate that he invited all the great and the good of the Tory party to come and visit regularly. So,
and he's a Brexit man, so...
Well, that helps, certainly. So plant more trees. That's our message to the Scottish Government on that one, do you think?
Absolutely.
Very good. Now, moving on, we've got a wee update on the new Children's Hospital in Edinburgh. This is the hospital where we've been hearing all sorts of horror stories about the ventilation system. Similar fault to the fault that was found at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, or the Southern, as we should call it, here in Glasgow. And this has delayed progress on getting the hospital actually opened. So now Jean Freeman is saying that there are moves in place and there should be a further report in September, which, it's only 2 months away. It's certainly frustrating, particularly after that issue had already emerged at the Southern in Glasgow. But it does seem now that there are moves being made to repair it or to resolve it.
Here's the thing, Kenny. Here's the thing. Who broke that story? It was a union official. This is a non-story. These things happen every time in building a new bridge, a new hospital. You get snags. A union official was asked, was anything wrong? He says, I'm really worried about something. Now, if that was an architect or an engineer that spoke to, and then they said they were really worried, then I'd look at the story in much more detail. But it wasn't. It was a union official, one person, who had an opinion on what was going to happen. There was nothing to back it up. Now, of course, when these stories run, Jean Freeman's got to be seen to be acting to do something about this. But in every job you'd get, any major construction, there's always going to be snagging. End of. Non-story, move on.
Well, I mean, I think probably you're right. People moving into a new build house will tell you exactly the same thing. There's always issues that need to be.
The only
cleared
issue
up.
is, Kenny, is because it's a sick kids hospital. There's a kind of
An emotional
tie to all this. So people are going, oh, it's sick kids, you can't put them in that hospital, it's all falling to bits. £150 million down the drain. So you get from a drainage system to £150 million down the drain in a couple of days, and that's the story. Actually, it's a non-story.
Speaking of the drainage, there is a wee correction that Jean Freeman has put in here. Reports in the media referencing a further 90 million for the new children's hospital are inaccurate and misleading. To date, the only additional payment since the full business case was approved is the 11.6 million settlement agreement for drainage, which has already been reviewed by the external auditor. The 80 million figure contained within this for enabling and equipment works has never been part of the £150 million contract for the hospital, and was part of the approved business case, which was made publicly available on the board's website following approval in 2015. Okay. It's not a new and unexpected cost for the site or connected to the delay. So as you say, that money that was set aside to deal with snagging issues.
Yeah, every building has one.
So, moving on now, we do come to the true nightmare story, the creeping horror that's coming to us on Halloween, of the UK leaving the EU. And this is a story from an Irish minister, Michael Darcy, who's a finance minister in the Irish government, saying some people in the UK have convinced themselves that no deal is a good thing and that there are no circumstances that the European Union would allow the EU to crash out. The European Union has moved the Brexit date on a number of occasions. I don't see any more flexibility. The deal will be done after the 31st of October. So he seems to be suggesting there that no deal will happen, and then there will also have to be some sort of repair work done after then to actually facilitate Britain functioning alongside the rest of Europe. What do we think about that, especially coming from an Irish politician?
Well, Ireland are part of Europe. They're part of the other 27 countries that are in talks about Brexit. Remember, Britain's alone in this. So Ireland's part of the big number. They know what they're talking about. It's interesting that Michael Gove is now starting to blame the EU for not negotiating a withdrawal bill. You couldn't make this up. He's going live and telling you. They're all getting on to the Europeans, and they're trying to make up a narrative that it's the people against the Parliament. So the Parliament could be EU or it could be the British Parliament, but the people have spoken in a referendum, and that is what's been railroaded, and they're trying to get people's opinion over on that. Whether it'll work or not, I don't know. If it goes to a general election, of course, that's going to be really interesting, because the polls are saying that Scotland will return a huge amount of SNP candidates. So that's going to, and if we go by Brendan McNeil's argument, use that as a plebiscite for a referendum, well then, we're home and hosed, aren't we? So no matter which way you look at it, it's all good for Scotland, although Brexit's never good for anyone.
Unless, as it turns out, we don't get that election and we've got nowhere to go for some time after the end of October.
Well, that's right, because if there's a vote of no confidence in the House of Commons, that's Boris Johnson, he could lose that. Then the government's, or the Parliament has 14 days to get a government, cobble a government together. And then it can go to a general election if that's not working well. So it doesn't matter what happens. Boris Johnson has got an awful lot of work to do if he wants to get a no deal. We'll just have to wait and see how that pans out. It's going to be really fast and interesting over the next couple of months.
Yeah, one of the things that we've seen is over and over throughout the last 3 years is this idea that somehow Britain would be able to drive a wedge between Ireland and the EU, or it was going to be Germany because the car manufacturers needed us, or France because we bought all their wine and cheese, or whatever it is. One of the things here now, this was the same minister, I think. It's important to show the solidarity from our European partners to a small nation in a time of difficulty. Financial support potentially may be required for the continent. Support would be on an EU-wide basis. The European budget is close to 270 billion euros, so it would be part of that European budget. It does seem that they're preparing to help Ireland specifically, especially given that Ireland is probably going to be worse affected than any other country apart from the UK.
And if you look at it, how are Scottish farmers and fishermen going to be dealt with by the UK government? Not very well. There's no money. How is Ireland's economy going to be affected? Well, the European Union is going to come and help them because they're a member state. That's the benefits of being in that wider union. And people always say, oh, well, you're moving out of one union to go to another, i.e. the United Kingdom, to go to Europe. Well, you're always treated as an equal nation in Europe. You're not treated as a subservient North Britain colony. And there's a big difference in that. And if people actually know that, but they're so bereft of ideas of how to combat the massive 52%, that they're just coming out with all sorts of bluster. The game's a bogey.
Yeah, I've always found that a slightly strange argument to argue that somehow leaving the UK and staying in the EU was contradictory. Especially when last time the argument was if you leave the UK, you will leave the EU. You know,
that's true.
There is very little about the entire Brexit story that makes any sense whatsoever to me.
There's one bit of sense, and that is that 2017, the European Commission said they would distribute authorisation to all countries for tax evasion laws. Mm-hmm. Every member state must adopt these laws. One country didn't. That was Britain. And those tax evasion laws, were supposed to be enacted in March 2019 this year, the same time as Brexit was supposed to happen. It's not about bringing back control. It's not about immigration, because we need immigration. That's a fact. Look at the health service. You need it. You need nurses from Bangladesh. You need doctors from wherever. It's not about that. It's about tax evasion. And those at the top, including in the Tory party, it's them that want Brexit to avoid the tax evasion directives. And let's not forget that. Let's not lose sight of that.
Yeah. Another story, and this is one that we've heard before, but it goes on, just builds on all the things that we're hearing. Britain will experience shortages of some fresh foods for weeks or even months if a disorderly no-deal Brexit leaves perishable produce rotting in lorries at ports. This is from Britain's Food and Drink Lobby. I think where is it now? The Food and Drink Association, I think. The Food and Drink Federation, sorry. Mm-hmm. So yeah, basically talking about how slow things may be at the border if customs checks end up backing traffic up. We could see food just rotting in the back of lorries rather than actually making it to the supermarket shelves.
But this
do you think this kind of story even penetrates the public consciousness anymore?
Well, no, it doesn't, because nothing's happened yet. People are still going out for a drink, going for a meal, getting their messages. They'll see an increase in the prices going up and their wages are going down, but they don't blame that. Well, most of the English people don't blame that on the government, they blame it on Europe. Mm-hmm. So as far as they're concerned, things will be rosy in the garden once they get Brexit. How wrong they will be. But they will not know that till it happens. But this story about Britain faces food shortages and no-deal Brexit scenario, we knew this months, even years ago, this would happen. I mean, tomato growers in Kent were saying, our tomatoes will go off. Yeah. This is when Dyson said, it doesn't matter if you're waiting 4 days at the docks for your Mike Hoovers to get put back across. And then the tomato grower said, well, it does if it's tomatoes.
For tomatoes, yeah.
You know, absolute ignorance of some people. So we've known this for a while. It's not new news, but I suppose it's worthwhile taking it out again and regurgitating it because it's going to happen.
Do you think there's a possibility, given that we've seen this ramping up of quite aggressive rhetoric about Ireland specifically, about Europe more generally, that if these kind of shortages do hit, do you think there's a possibility that the people, or at least the Brexit voters, simply won't accept that it's their fault? That they'll look at it and say, this is the damned EU punishing us.
Yes.
Rather than saying, this is a mess that we made and we need to fix.
Very good point. We don't have a crystal ball, but if you're looking ahead and that scenario does happen, well then everybody wants to blame something for something, you know. And I think there will be, especially against Europe, in the days and the weeks and the months after, when shortages of medicines go down and food shortages go down as well. People will be scrambling along, because remember, Kenny, this is not a war. We're not in an environmental catastrophe. This is a thing of our own doing. This is the people's vote to take us out of Europe. This is just a vote they took. So I guess they will look for people to vote, and it'll be Europe. And Europe will just be going like that, back to them. It's your own fault. You voted for it. Take it or leave it. It's not our fault.
So there's one other wee story here. This is about the end of Britain's participation in the Interrail network after nearly 5 decades. This is the Interrail, of course, is a sort of one ticket that covers you for train travel across Europe. I think we all knew people when we were young, possibly at university or whatever, who went interrailing for the summer. It was something that certainly several of my friends did. And now Britain has removed itself from that. The Rail Delivery Group, representing train operators, has decided not to continue with Eurail, which is an even sort of bigger version of the Interrail product, if you like.
Yes.
Says that in response, the Eurail Group has decided to end our membership from 1st January 2020, despite us wanting to remain part of the group. This is not linked to our membership of the EU.
Well, they would say that.
Well, yeah.
Here's another thought about this. I've used it as well. I've gone all over Europe. Bought a ticket in Venice. I said, can I get a ticket to Prague? Then I'm going to Krakow in Poland. But I want to come back to Prague on that train so I can move down to Budapest on one ticket. And I paid it. And it was cheap. It's cheap. It's very cheap. The thing about this is, the first thing that comes into my mind is the Europeans can come to London, but they can't get any further because they're going to have to buy. They're going to pay. I don't know what the real tickets are. I think it's about £90 to get from one city to another thing. It's very expensive.
Yeah,
you can fly cheaper.
Yeah.
So they're going to see all those high tickets when they come over. They're going to see all those, let's say, out of date rail lines, out of date carriages, out of date stations, and they're going to tell us you're not as good as Europe. That's not what we want to hear after Brexit, is it?
No.
Because Brexit's supposed to be rosy and brilliant. But if we're getting told that your systems are rubbish, we don't come to want to see you anyway. I think that's what British governments are afraid of. I really do. And Interrail, it's a bad move. It's depriving our kids of European travel, world travel, and travel enhances your education, it enhances your life experience, and to deny our youngsters that is a scandal. And
as well, it's this is perhaps going to more affect tourists coming here, which obviously we don't want to, even if you want to discourage immigrants, which we shouldn't. You certainly don't want to discourage tourists.
Well, that's true.
That seems to be who's going to be worst affected by this.
It is.
From the British economy's perspective, anyway.
That's right. And if you think about what's happening quite soon, the Edinburgh Festival is happening. Now, a lot of people from all over Europe come to Edinburgh. It's a massive, massive event. A lot of them come by train, a lot of flying as well. But train's a good way from, if you've got the Interrail system, you can do it. Once if that's going to stop them coming to the Edinburgh Festival, that's going to knock on our economy. And we talked about the economy growing by 0.5% or whatever it was earlier. Well, the Edinburgh Festival, take that out of our economy and we'll sink a couple of points because it is a big earner for us. So you can see already that Brexit, and they're saying that it isn't Brexit, but it is. It's a dislike of Johnny Foreigner. We don't want them here. Why should we give them cheap travel when our own people don't get it? Because it's cheaper over there and it's better over there. So they expect it same over here because we're a European country. But we don't have that.
No.
And I think that's what the stumbling block is.
Our rail network certainly is far below the standards that you see in most of Europe. Certainly in my experience.
Me too.
And one other short note in this, it points out that you can still get the Eurostar to London, but then, as you said, the kind of travelling on prices are very expensive. So again, it concentrates things in London. Tourists are less likely to ever get out of London.
Bang on.
That's
exactly what will happen.
I have a real issue with how London-centric tourism in this country is anyway. I mean, you go into Edinburgh, Glasgow Airport, and half the merchandise on sale is shortbread and whiskey, and the other half is London.
Yes, indeed.
And it's something that I find genuinely extraordinary. Because I'll bet my boots you can't go into Heathrow and find find a shred of tartan anywhere.
No. And would Denmark put up that from Germany if Germany owned, like Scotland is run by England?
Yeah.
If Germany ran Denmark, that's what it would be as well. But they don't. They're more sophisticated over there.
It's something where even you look at other countries. I've mentioned this before, but in Germany, I don't know if you're aware, they have a show called Dinner for One. It's a huge event on Hogmanay. Oh, everybody in Germany watches it. It's this old play, an old English play. It's in English. It's a very strange thing. But in Germany, you can find that translated on television. You can find translated versions of it in High German, in Austrian, in Swiss German, in Bavarian, in Swabian.
Wow.
And they appreciate their regions. Yeah. They appreciate that within Germany there are, a dozen different cultures and a dozen different languages. It would be the equivalent of having, say, Scotch and Rye translated into Doric,
Gaelic.
And Lowlands and Gaelic.
Exactly.
And it's something that Britain does very, very badly. We have London and we have everything else.
Everything's London-centric from a broadcasting point of view. I mean, BBC.
Well, not here, obviously.
Not here. But BBC, I used to work with the BBC. The news would, if you put on Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 3, Radio 4 at the same time, same news. Radio Scotland, same news with a kilt on. That's all. And then you get people from London to talk about things that are down in London, and they talk about stuff. It's not a Scottish news system, because if you talk about a murder, Celtic Rangers, and then the weather, that's hardly news to people. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing, and we need to up our. Well, the BBC are losing viewers and listeners hand over fist because they're not delivering.
We are going to talk about that later on as well. It's almost like you've been looking ahead there, Norrie. So, coming in the wake of Brexit and coming in the wake of the recent poll news that we had, all very good for independence, we had John McDonnell the other day talking to Ian Dale at his show at the Fringe, saying that if the Scottish people decide they want a referendum, that's for them. He said the decision whether there should be a referendum will be for the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people to decide. We would not block something like that. We would let the Scottish people decide. That's democracy, which is all very nice. Although, from all accounts, Richard Leonard has not responded well.
Or Ian Murray.
Or Ian Murray, or probably most of the people who are fighting the Labour unionist cause in Scotland. Well, first of all, I should point out that I read an article in The Guardian, I think by Jonathan Friedland, which managed to report on this and say that John McDonnell was being far too generous because the SNP would never prop up the Labour Party. Would prop up the Labour Party against the Tories anyway. But managed to not mention at all that the Scottish Parliament has already voted on this.
Yes, got mandate.
And has been refused on multiple occasions. Yeah. I wonder if John McDonnell would ever actually join the 52% on the picket lines and say this is what we demand, because that's democracy.
Well, that's very interesting, Kenny, because I watched that interview and I thought John McDonnell was very very tired, and I thought he was giving away. He wasn't on form, and he said a few things. But once you're in that democracy mood, if you have a second people's referendum for Brexit, why can't you have a second one for Scotland? Now, that's eminently sensible. That's refreshingly democratic. It's just when you get people like Ian Murray calling John McDonnell irresponsible, not Labour, that is to give in to nationalism, whether it's be for Brexit or for Scottish independence. Note, bracketing nationalism in the one there. What's his name? Richard Leonard, talking to him that very this morning and saying, take that back. Scottish people, despite the 52% poll, do not want a referendum, do not want to be in poverty, do not want this and that and the next thing. So you just get the feeling Scottish Labour is distancing themselves so much from the mother party in London because they look over their shoulder and guess who runs away with the looking after the UK argument better? The Tories. And they can't get them. They can't get on that side. They can't get on that ladder because the Tories have got it. The best thing for Labour to do would be actually just say, do you know what? Independence. Come on, we've looked at it all. But they can't. Ian Murray can't because he wears his Union Jack jacket and he's got, he's that way inclined. He loves Westminster. He gets a packet, 63 grand. He does nothing for Scotland. Nothing. The cupboard's bare when you look at his legacy. Absolutely nothing there. What have he done? Absolutely nothing. And the other thing is, it's a desperate attempt to save their seats because if there is a general election, Kenny, we've said it before, SNP are going to mop up. Ian Murray as well. So what's going to be left for them? And it's a bit like Ruth Davidson. Where does she go now? Because Boris Johnson doesn't want her. The Tories have said, get rid of Scotland as long as we get Brexit. So where's your perfect, precious union now? I really don't get these unionists that stand firm for the union, but it gives them nothing back.
Yeah, you made a couple of quite interesting points there. First of all, it occurred to me that perhaps John McDonnell was trying to soften the line a wee bit on the basis that the Labour Party has lost so many voters to the SNP. And perhaps by saying, actually, we don't hate democracy in Scotland and we understand that you might want to vote for independence and not be completely evil. So I'm going to soften the line a wee bit and say, well, sure, if you guys can get a majority and vote for it and just pretend that you haven't already done that, then we're on your side. And potentially it was an effort to win those people back. But as you say, the Scottish Labour establishment is just so pig-headed that anything about the SNP has to be opposed under any and all circumstances. And particularly if it comes to ever having a vote on independence. And, the obvious question arises, if you think you can win it, why not let us hold it? And if you don't think you can win it, what moral right do you have to hold on to us?
That's right. Indeed, lots of good points raised there. I think John McDonnell is looking at the figures, to be honest, and he's looking at Labour in meltdown in Scotland. I mean, who's going to vote for them now? Where do they hang their coat? There's no class war anymore. There's just the rich, the very, very rich, and us at the bottom. So where do they fit in? Nuclear. They're still wanting nuclear weapons based in Scotland. There's a whole load of things that they haven't moved an inch on for 40 odd years, and they think the Scottish people are going to go back to them. Oh, no chance.
Yeah, and you raised the Tories as well. Certainly the shine has come off Ruth Davidson over the last wee while. I mean, I keep pointing out because I think it's hilarious that she picked virtually every candidate in the Tory leadership election, and as soon as she picked them, they lost.
They lost, and even the winner, she lost.
And her whole thing that was supposedly called Operation Arse to prevent Boris Johnson winning, which was supposed to get the 13 Scottish Tories kind of doing all the campaigning work.
That's right.
On Ruth's behalf, came to absolutely nothing because virtually all of them immediately fell in behind Boris Johnson.
Yeah, and also Kenny, she campaigned quite vigorously to get David Mundell retained as a Scottish Secretary of State. No chance.
Has been completely rebuffed.
So what's left for her?
It is an interesting question because I think a lot of people in probably the Labour Party and the Lib Dems as well were relying on Ruth Davidson to be the strong opposition come another referendum. And it does seem like even amongst the Tories, she's lost a lot of power and a lot of influence.
She has. And the new darling of the unionist side is Jo Swinson. They picked up on her. She's got this super uber sense of being important. I'm afraid to say she's not really. She's got a track record that's as bad as Margaret Thatcher had. Austerity, cutting teacher numbers, student fees. She was an integral part of that rejected them. She could have stood her ground and says, I'm resigning from this government. But she didn't, did she? She went ahead, and the student fees were delivered to the English students as when they tried to scrap them. She's a fad. She'll be passing off, and she'll be forgotten about as soon as Brexit's over. She'll be nobody.
The Jo Swinson thing. I have a question that I've not heard anybody ask any Lib Dems yet. Is that she's a Scottish MP in a federal party, which has its own Scottish leader, but she's the national party leader for the whole UK. So does she report to Willie Rennie, who then reports back to her?
I think the constitution says that they're a British party, and the British party have elected Jo Swinson as their leader. So she's got the trump card over wee Willie Rennie. But
does Willie Rennie no longer have any authority in East Bartonshire? Is that what we're saying?
Well, he never did, to be honest. But he's over in Fife. She's in Dumbarton. But she doesn't. The thing about Jo Swinson that really annoys me, and I've said this on Indie Live Radio, is that she speaks like she's just swallowed a wasp. She can't say her Scottish R's. She can't pronounce them. And sow, no, it's so if you come from Dumbarton. But she's sow. And there's all these things, and she's trying to morph herself into a proper English MP. She can get lost as far as I'm concerned.
That Fraser Nelson accent, isn't it?
Aye, him as well. Oh, Muppets.
Just bizarre accents that bear no analysis whatsoever. Yes, I don't know what they are. But anyway, on to another quite disturbing story about borders in its own way. This is Pakistan expelling the Indian ambassador as the Kashmir dispute escalates. They've also decided not to send their own new ambassador to India. They're certainly, it seems like a real breakdown in diplomatic relations between Pakistan and India here over Kashmir, which has been a point of conflict since partition back 70 years ago. This whole story, if you've not been following it's quite difficult to know exactly what's going on because the internet and telephones have been cut off throughout Kashmir. We had a report here today of the director of the largest hospital group in Kashmir wasn't able to speak to anyone himself on the phone. He had to go to the local kind of administrative offices to be able to make calls to plan care. The police stations were all issued with satellite phones, but other than that, there is no communications there at all. We've heard that a couple of former, I believe they're called governors in Kashmir. Two former governors who have been taken into custody, and nobody knows what's happening to them. This is about the Article 370 of the Indian Constitution gives Kashmir a degree of autonomy. It has its own flag. It has its own immigration policy. And it also has rules on allowing non-Kashmiris to settle there and to own land. This is partly because Kashmir is not a Hindu dominated area. The majority of it, India is Hindu. This area is predominantly Muslim, Sikh, and as well with some Buddhists who are kind of linked to Tibet, which brings China into the whole question. China has expressed a lot of concern about it. So, amidst all this mess, I know you've got a wee bit of knowledge about this situation, certainly more than I do. So what do we make of what's going on in Kashmir just now?
Well, Kashmir has been a tug-of-war between Pakistan and India for decades. There's one big reason for this, and it's not been reported too much because a lot of the news journalists have concentrated on India and the Sikh Hindu group against the Muslim Pakistans. What we haven't been told is that the water, the River Indus, goes right through Kashmir. 80%, it was agreed in 1957, would be going to Pakistan. 20% can come to India. At that point, I don't know why these things were made, why they were written down, but over the last 5, maybe 4 years, and a lot of my information, believe it or not, Kenny, has come from Kashmir, the programme that was about the football team, which showed you the manager, a Scots guy, David Robertson, actually trying to get his electricity put together again so he could get heat. He says really cold. Getting broadband was just a nightmare, and he's a manager of the football team. But the owners of the football team, one was a Muslim and one was a Hindu, and says, we got on very well together. Everything's fine here, no problem. But the water problem, what's happened is India has started damming part of the Indus River that flows to Pakistan. When you start cutting off that water, you've lost your irrigation, you've got lost good drinking water from the hills, and it's gone right down into India. Now, the Article 370, if they revoke that, that means India can come back into Kashmir and take over again, and take over the water. It's about the water. And people are fighting tooth and nail for that stretch of water. And Imran Khan is now saying they're going to take up sanctions against India. They're going to withdraw their ministers. There's going to be all kinds of things happening. But don't forget, both those countries have a nuclear ammunition. And that's the most dangerous thing about this. Over water, they would be quite prepared, I'm sure, to fire nuclear weapons, missiles at each other. And that's why the UN must come in, the Security Council must gather and try to resolve this. And it's the dams that are at the bottom of this. It's not been said, but I can tell you, water is the lifeblood for everybody.
When you talk about the UN Security Council there, certainly China has a direct interest in this area remaining peaceful. It would be a major problem for China if there were to be more serious conflict. What do we think the rest of the Security Council might think? I mean, Britain obviously at the moment does not have a lot of friends internationally.
No.
The US also seems to be on a mission to lose friends internationally, and is led by a president who seems to be very unwilling to engage in new international adventures. And then we have Russia, where it can be quite difficult to predict anything about what Russia might do. Right. Do you have any thoughts about how the UN Security Council might respond to this?
Well, these countries that you mentioned, Britain, America, Russia, all want to flex their muscles on the world stage. If India and Pakistan, I remember Donald Trump is not a fan of Muslims or what they represent. So he would quite easily, the guy's that mad, he would easily turn on them with sanctions or whatever he could get out of their country back. And India as well, he'd try and become the world leader on the world stage, because that's the kind of thing he does anyway. Mm-hmm. So whether you like it or not, he would still be involved at some point, and Putin would be there as well. And you know what, Johnny come lately, Boris Johnson would be trying to keep the British end up as well. Mm-hmm. Because remember, India was part of the empire, and this is what a lot of Brexiteers are harking back to, Dunkirk and the empire spirit and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think the Security Council will be as potent, but even if it's just seem to be doing something, getting two sides together, I think that might just be the thing we need. But I can't see it. It's gone too far in this one.
Now we've with the government in India, it's Narendra Modi is the I think the Prime Minister. Leader of quite a strong Hindu nationalist government. This is something that we're seeing in a lot of countries just now. Rises of these quite aggressive, quite macho nationalist governments. We've seen, for example, in Spain, we've seen autonomy in Catalonia suspended. Yeah. We've seen in this country, we've seen effectively democracy suspended in the north of Ireland. We've seen it discussed about Scotland. We've seen people like Orban in Hungary. We've seen the Polish nationalists, and of course Trump, who is getting more and more terrifying to me day by day on this white nationalism kick that he's been on recently. Mm-hmm. Is this part of a trend, do you think, to try and kind of strengthen countries, however those they see themselves as strengthening themselves?
All those countries you mentioned, Kenny, are ruled by men. Some of the best countries, and I don't include people like Margaret Thatcher and Theresa May in this. These were women wanting to be men and act like men in the world stage, but they couldn't do it. But we're talking about if we have a more democratic, get more women involved, you tend to get a different politic involved. Like Sweden and Norway, you've got a very more child poverty agenda, you've got child care. You've got mental health issues at the top. You've got family, because that's what counts. It's not about war in another country. It's not about asset stripping in another country. It's nothing like that. So we need to get away from this I'm better, I'm bigger than you thing. But some people are living in the dark ages like Trump and Johnson, and that's the kind of thing they think will win them votes. That's why they do it. We've got Nicola Sturgeon. And now on Indie Live Radio, we put out all kinds of audios, Scotland Is Now, and it's about welcoming people to Scotland. It's a whole different thing coming from the Scottish Government, because Nicola Sturgeon understands that people have to come here to work, to live, to love, and we can't shoo them away. Not in England. You've got Boris Johnson, and before that was Theresa May, who stood by her whatever principles she ever had, but before that was David Cameron, and before that it goes on.
Yeah.
So these people are always wanting to flex their political muscles on a world stage because they think that's the right thing to do. It's absolutely pointless.
Yeah. Do you think we talked the other day on the show about the well-being economy that the First Minister was talking about in her TED talk, and you notice that the three countries that are pursuing that with Scotland, or including Scotland, are New Zealand, run by Jacinda Ardern, a young woman.
That's right.
And Iceland, also, I forget the woman's name.
King's daughter. I think that's
the new leader in Iceland, also a young woman. It does seem like there is a wave there that's kind of perhaps emerged as a counter to this kind of, as you say, quite masculine, nationalistic, othering sort of thing that's risen in politics and around the world.
Well, I think people are now are sick fed up. I mean, in Canada, they bucked the trend there. Pierre Trudeau. Is it Pierre? No, it's not. It's
Justin. Pierre's his old man.
Aye. Trudeau. He's becoming more and more liberal with his politics. And welcoming immigration is a good thing to Canada because they need it as well, and going against Trump in a lot of issues. So there is a kind of trend going that we want something different, and I think this is what drives independence. We want something different in our lives, to look forward to enjoy, and the TED thing going. You mentioned it about measuring health and well-being as a factor to judge the state of your country instead of wealth. I think is bang on the money, because loads of people have money and are never happy. But I know if you can measure a country by how happy they are, like Denmark, because they get to go on their bikes through the streets of Copenhagen over cars. If you go to Norway, they've got huts. Every family's got a hut they go to visit. What's Scotland got? Everybody's compressed into this central belt. The Highlands are absolutely empty. You said it yourself earlier. They're scarred. They're uninhabited. Not in Norway. I had the pleasure of going right to the tundra, the north of Norway, and my phone started working amazingly fast because I was I was working offshore on an oil rig. We went on boat, and up there they're all in skis, ice skis, and they've got sheep and they've got reindeer, and they've got a sawmill and they've got a hydropower station and blah blah blah. And they're all happy. They're cold, they're freezing, they've got to work, and they've got less daylight than we have, and they don't drink, and they're still happier than any of us. Why don't we take a lesson from that?
I couldn't have put it better myself. We had a couple of other stories to talk about. I would like to just discuss one very quickly, which somehow I managed to have lost my wee bit of paper about. But this is about the drop in viewing figures for the BBC in Scotland, drop in audience satisfaction. What do you think of the BBC in Scotland right now? We saw, of course, the new BBC Scotland channel launched a wee bit earlier this year. Viewing figures have not been what was hoped for there.
No.
What's what's wrong with the BBC in Scotland? Because, and bear in mind, we only have a few minutes.
Right. First of all, first thing, they're too London-centric. Secondly, they don't put enough sport on that matches our ambitions. Get back to Iceland, a country that didn't have a football team 20 years ago. The women got involved, put pitches down. 20 years later, they're beating England in the World Cup. They're in the European finals. We need to get our women footballers on telly more. We need to have live football for not just Celtic and Rangers, not just the big games. We need to get our hockey. We need to get shinty. We need to get all those things. We need another channel just for the sport, Kenny. We haven't got it. And this is what we're craving. Now, at Indie Live Radio, we get hundreds of people telling us they've come away from Radio Scotland because they don't want to know the question that they put out a couple of weeks ago. Are you still doing your weekly shop? Phone radios. Absolutely pointless. They want to know from us what's happening in Brexit, what's happening with SNP, when is the referendum happening, what's happening with austerity, those kind of questions, big questions that affect them. BBC do not ask those questions. That's why they're losing people.
Well,
is that enough?
That pretty much covers it, I think. Have you personally watched much of the news channel?
Mm-hmm. And do you know this? I'm quite satisfied with some of the content. The debate show they had, which kind of replicated or replaced Question Time, a Scottish version, was really good. The audience were very balanced. The presenter gave everybody a chance to answer the questions, didn't butt in. Very good flowing programme. The Nine has had its difficulties, but they're coming on. Some of the things they're reporting on, of like over in Ireland, a different perspective. Really interesting, good journalism, but it's not enough. It's not enough. It's on at 9 o'clock. When people are going, kids can't watch it, they're going to their beds. Why can't you put it on earlier? So youngsters who are brains like sponges, we mentioned this earlier, can watch your programmes and get inspired by what they're saying.
Yeah. That's just about running out of time now. I will just say, as Norrie was saying there, there's a lot of good television that could be made in Scotland, and a lot of good television that should be made in Scotland. And Broadcasting Scotland, we are trying.
Oh, you are? Brilliant.
Trying lots of people's patience, I suppose. But we are doing our very best. I say this every time. We are working on a shoestring budget here, and there are lots of things we would love to do. We would love to be out covering more music and events, covering more sport. As you say, it's something we would love to be able to do, and we have the capacity to do it if we had A, people, and B, a wee bit more money. So if you're interested in volunteering, you can contact us at the website. It's on screen there, broadcastingscotland.scot. You can also donate, broadcastingscotland.scot/register. You can become a supporter, £5 a month. If we can get a few thousand more subscribers, we can actually have full-time paid staff here making TV by Scots for Scots in Scotland. And I think anybody who's watching this now appreciates the value of that. On the other side of the media spectrum, Norrie, could you just tell us a wee bit about Indie Live Radio?
On the other side, IndieLive.radio will be performing on Friday, 11 o'clock till 2, the Norrie Hunter Show. We'll be having guests. I think we're talking about the Growth Commission, so it should be a really good in-depth programme about that. What does it mean for people? Playing great music. Same as you, Kenny. We've got lots of ideas. We've got lots of people involved now. We've got more and more researchers coming in. We're just needing a few more presenters. That'd be good. We're doing podcasts. We're running those. We're running the ads from the Scottish Government. Ones that are good. Ones that we don't think are merit any airtime at all. We don't play. It's only the good ones that we think have got merit. But it's more importantly than anything else, it's Scotland's show for Scottish people. And what we mean by that, anyone staying in Scotland. It doesn't matter where you came from originally. If you're in Scotland, we've got something for you.
Not about where you're from, it's about where you're at, isn't it?
Bang on.
So thank you very much to Norrie Hunter from Indie Live Radio. Do go and check them out whenever you're not watching Broadcasting Scotland. And so from Norrie, from myself, Kenny McBride, and from everyone here at Broadcasting Scotland, this has been Scotland at 7. Thank you so much for watching.